Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Torah Studies. So, as you may have noticed, today is a little bit different. If we ask the Manashtana what makes tonight different than other Tuesday nights, you might say that usually we focus on the Torah portion. This week, we focus on the upcoming holiday. This is a very special holiday edition of Torah Studies, and we're going to focus on the holiday of Shavuot, which we've been talking about, vis-a-vis cheesecake. What's funny, I don't know if it's funny. Ironic, I don't know if it's ironic. We'll have to ask Alanis Morissette for that. But I'll tell you what's interesting. What I find interesting about Shavuot is it's the most important holiday, I think. Because if not for the Torah, what is anything, right? Like, we wouldn't even, like, you said, well, no, Passover because of the Exodus. Yeah, but is there even Passover if there's no Torah? If there's no Torah, there's no Judaism, there's no Yiddishkeit, there's no mitzvahs, there's no Pesach, there's no Seder, like none of this exists. So Shavuot is really, the anniversary of the giving of the Torah Sinai is really the central holiday. It's the shortest of the biblical holidays other than Rosh Hashanah. It's like a one-day holiday in Israel, 2 days in the diaspora. So we do it this year. It falls out on a Friday, Saturday. It's a quick holiday. It's not like Sukkot, which is 8 days, or Passover, which is 8 days. It's much shorter. And we don't really find a lot of mitzvot associated with the holiday. So like Passover, okay, you tell me, what mitzvah comes to mind, Passover? Eating matzah. Sukkot, what mitzvah comes to mind? Sukkah, what else?
The lulav and the etrog.
Right, shaking the lulav and the etrog. Good. Shavuot, what comes to mind? Cheesecake, right?
No.
You think about it, it's like, huh? Okay, well, how did that happen? Like, it's so weird that you don't really have. Now, yes, we listen to the Ten Commandments in synagogue on Friday. That there's a custom, a tradition that we do that, but that's not a biblical. It's not a biblical commandment.
It happened because of Tenuva.
Tenuva.
That's the dairy company in
yeah,
Israel.
we have Tenuva butter.
Oh, nice.
We've been using Tenuva butter in the dairy kitchen. Yeah. So look, it's weird because it's the most important holiday. Central, like you can't get more central than the day the Torah was given, and yet it seems like the commemoration is a bit lacking. Can I say that? I hope I'm not like upsetting any Shavuot fans. It's like I'm a huge fan, but yeah, the kids have an ice cream. We eat dairy. By the way, for those that wonder why we eat dairy on this holiday. Why specifically dairy? There are many, many different answers or reasons that are given. One that I love is that the numerology, the gematria of chalav, which means milk, chet is 8, lamed is 30, and bet is 2. 30 is 40. And how many days did Moshe spend on the mountain? 40 days and 40 nights. So there you go. It's all in the numbers. But there's also a technical reason given that when God gave us the command, so the original, when God gave us the Torah at Sinai 3,338 years ago, it fell out on a Shabbat. And that was the first time we got the rules of kosher. Well, you get the rules of kosher, you suddenly realize you gotta prepare some, if you want meat, you gotta prepare some kosher food. Dairy is much easier. A vegetarian meal is also much easier. So what turned out then is that they couldn't eat meat on that day because they just weren't prepared. Nothing was koshered. The animals weren't prepared properly for kosher meat. So on that original day that the Torah was given, they had dairy. So we have dairy, but it's a commemoration. It's a custom. We don't really find a strong mitzvah energy with Shavuot. And some say because the whole day is about the Torah. So like to do any specific commemoration of a mitzvah is almost to take away from the centrality of it. Does that make sense? That it's like almost like too big to commemorate in one specific way. So other holidays has a specific angle to it. But Shavuot, because it's like the whole Torah, what do you do, one mitzvah? You can't do one mitzvah. It's the whole situation. So instead, again, we drown ourselves in dairy and cheesecake. All right, so here we go. Today I want to speak about noise versus quiet. And not in the context of a house or a library or a synagogue. I want to speak about it in the context of divine revelation. Because what we find is something fascinating. When the Torah was given at Sinai in the year 2448, in the Jewish years, 2448, which is 3,338 years ago, we find that that spectacle is described in Torah as being one filled with noise and a lot of fanfare. So let's read from the original. Let's go to the Torah itself. Let's go to the source, and let's see how this experience is described. I am going to pull up. All right, who's got? Let's see. Everyone's got a copy here. Let us. Okay, Dasi, I'm going to ask you to read in just a moment. This is text number 1 from the book of Exodus, where the experience at Sinai is described. Hold on. Let me just pull this up for myself. All right, take it away, please.
And it was on the 3rd day in the morning, and there was thunder and lightning and a thick cloud on the mountain. And there was a mighty, continuous shofar blast, and the people in the camp trembled.
Okay, so let's break this down. Thank you for reading that. Number 1, the 3rd day in the morning. What does it mean, the 3rd day? So this is a reference to the preparation that took place prior to receiving the Torah at Sinai. So for about a week, maybe not a week, several days before the experience, God tells Moses to tell the people to prepare themselves in various ways. One of them is to abstain from physical intimacy with their spouses for 3 days prior to the experience, as, I don't know, as I guess an experience of holiness or something like that. So it's called the Shloshet Yemei Hagbala, the 3 days of separation, as it were. So here the Torah says it was the 3rd day in the morning, and it was about to happen. And how is the experience marked? So if you look at what we just read, there's thunder, lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, a shofar blast. The people are trembling. There's a lot of quaking and noise, and it's a very big experience. So what's clear is that when the Torah was given at Sinai, there was a lot of noise. Contrast this with what God says to Elijah the prophet. I'm going to do a little bit of background on Elijah. So first of all, what do we know about Elijah? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Eliyahu, Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. What comes to mind?
He gets a cup at the Seder.
He gets a cup at the Seder. What else? Elijah. What else? Elijah.
He went straight to heaven.
Went to heaven, yes. Went to heaven without dying. Good. What else? Harbinger of the redemption? Yeah.
He's also at the bris.
Good. He goes to the circumcisions. He goes to the Seders. He has some wine. He has a special kisei shel Eliyahu. He has a special chair at the circumcision. The question is why? Why is Elijah? Why? And he was taken. He didn't die. He was taken in a flaming chariot to have how unusual. So what's going on with Elijah? I want to give you a little bit of background on this that might change the way you think about him, but not. I mean, this just so you have a little bit of perspective. Elijah, if you look at his story, was almost too pure for this world, and again. So he was a prophet, and he was very frustrated over the fact that the people in his time, and he lived, in the first temple era, more than 2,500 years ago, 2,800 years ago. So he lived at a time when the people had started, getting involved in things that they perhaps shouldn't, like idolatry. One of the big idols at the time was the Baal. Now, however they worshiped that idol, they worshiped the idol, and he was very upset. Here you have the Jewish people. The most basic tenet of Judaism is the idea of monotheism and not worshiping other gods. And here you have the Jewish people are worshiping other gods. And he was sent by God to admonish the people. And he did. And he even challenged, famous story, on Har Carmel, the Mount Carmel. He challenged the prophets of the Baal, 250, I think, prophets of the Baal, to a little showdown, a little challenge as to whose God is, is the Baal, does the Baal have any power, or is it only God Almighty? And he has these prophets of the Baal bring their offerings, and the way it worked. You guys are familiar with the story? Yeah? No? Okay, basically he said, you're going to bring the fire for the wood for the altar. Create the altar, bring the fire. Everything is ready except create the altar, bring the wood, but you can't use fire. And whoever can bring fire down from heaven, that will prove, because for the offering, that will prove that that's the real God. So the Nevi, how about the prophets of the Baal? They try and they're praying and they're dancing, they're hopping, and he chides them. He's like, oh, maybe your God can't hear you, or maybe you're not jumping, high enough, and nothing happens. And then he takes the ultimate showman. He takes water and pours it on his wood, like the ultimate magic trick. Like, I'm going to pour water on the wood, and then he turns to God and says, okay, God, at this point, I did this all for you. You got to hook me up, because if this doesn't work, it's going to be bad news. And he prays, and a fire comes down, whoosh, and lights up his thing. And everyone says, Hashem, Hu Elokim, God is the real God. And all the people believed. Then you know what happened shortly afterward? They again slipped into idolatry. It was a recurring thing back in the day. They slipped again into idolatry. They had an epiphany, they had clarity, and then not too long after. So he gets very frustrated. Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, gets very frustrated with the people, because here he is trying to direct them, trying to guide them, and even like demonstrating in this public manner that the Baal, this idol, was worthless and powerless, and that Hashem is the only true God. And yet they're not getting it. So he turns to God. He's depressed. He says to God, basically says, I don't want to be here anymore. Like, I can't deal with these people. I'm the only one left. I'm the only one that believes in you. And God tells him essentially that don't think you're the only one who believes in me. You will for all time go to every Brit Milah, every circumcision, where parents bring their child into the covenant, the Jewish covenant, and you'll see that you're not the only one. So for thousands of years, his soul, or whatever, he's sent back to earth to witness another child entering the Jewish covenant and realizing that no, he's not the only one, even if it was challenging in his time. But no, Judaism still lives on, and people still believe and follow in the ways of the Torah. But anyway, that's his story. So he's too pure to even belong in this world. That's why, like, he doesn't die the death of mortals with his body returning to earth. He was too pure. His entire, being, body and soul, almost needs to go up to heaven. That's kind of like his story. The reason that I mention this is because part of his dramatic dialogue with Hashem, with God, is that God is trying to teach him how you don't need spectacle. Spectacle is not really going to influence others. Like, you did a big promotion for God on top of that mountain, and everyone saw the fire come down, but that doesn't necessarily convince people in an internal way. That's a spectacle, but it doesn't create transformation. Transformation typically happens in the quieter spaces. So that's a long introduction, but now let's read the next text. Meira, if you don't mind, please read text number 2. This is straight from the book of Kings, when God is speaking with Elijah and telling him where God is to be found.
And he said, "Go out and stand in the mountain to face God. Before God you will see a great and strong wind splitting the mountains and shattering boulders. But God is not in the wind. After the wind there will be an earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake there will be a fire, but God is not in the fire. And after the fire a still, silent voice."
And by the way, even though it doesn't spell it out, you know where God is? In the still and silent voice. God is not in the strong wind. God is not in the earthquake. God is not in the fire, but God is in the still, silent voice. And again, that was a message to Elijah. You can create spectacles and public displays and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, the transformation is going to happen in the quiet spaces, in those quiet moments where real change happens. It's kind of those personal things. And by the way, the prophet, the Navi, that took over from Eliyahu Navi, from Elijah the prophet, was Elisha. And Elisha, he dealt with the people in a much, much different way. He was a leader that was not about public spectacle. He was about helping people almost like individually. Like, he helps, whatever. We're not going to go through the stories of Elisha, but his miracles happen on a much more personal level, and that's kind of where the change happens. I want to share with you the following question. Because what we have here is a tale of two revelations. Revelation at Sinai happens with the spectacle, and then God tells Elijah, I'm not in the spectacle. So my question to you is, which one is it? I mean, are both true? Why at Sinai? If God is in the still, silent voice, if God is in that kol d'mamadaka, that very quiet and still voice, if that's where God is, then why at Mount Sinai? 3,338 years ago, come 3 days from now, why did God appear and show up with thunder and lightning and a cloud and a shofar blast and the mountain trembling? Why was that a spectacle? Is it about the spectacle or is it about the still silent voice? Which one is it, I ask? And yes, you could say both, but what does that really mean? Which one is it? Okay, so that's our opening question. I want to build some more questions. And to do that, I want to read a section from the Haftarah for the holiday of Shavuot. So just to explain. In synagogues around the world, every week, every Shabbat, as well as every holiday, there's a public Torah reading. So you take the Torah from the ark, put it on the table, you open it up, and you read a section. And each week, you continue, and throughout the year, you finish the entire 5 books of Moses, reading it publicly in the synagogue. And for the holidays, you pick and choose from the Torah the relevant sections for the holidays. So for example, on the first day of Shavuot, Friday morning, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we will read that section that we just read in text 1 about the original experience at Sinai. We'll read about the 10 Commandments, and there's a custom that everybody should show up and listen to the 10 Commandments. It's a beautiful reenactment or kind of recommitment. Wonderful. However, after the Torah is read, what happens? We read a section from the books of the prophets, which is the Haftarah. Historically, the reason for this is because there was a time when public Torah reading was banned. The Romans banned it. Other nations that were in control of at various points in time of the Jewish people also banned it, again, at selected times in history. And it was at those times, and I think it originated with the Roman ban, where if you couldn't read the Torah publicly from the 5 books of Moses, so they selected other associated reading, something that was relevant to the main Torah reading from the books of the prophets, and they read that instead. When the ban was rescinded, we kept the custom of reading the Haftarah. I want to read for you. I have here the Siddur, the prayer book, which has the Haftarah, the Torah reading for the holiday of Shavuot, and it is from the book of Ezekiel, Yecheskel. Ezekiel chapter 1, the first 28 verses, and then chapter 3, verse number 12. So it's the beginning of the book of Ezekiel. Yecheskel HaNavi was one of the prophets of the Jewish people. He actually lived at the end of the first temple era. So he lived a while after Elijah, the prophet that we were just speaking of. He lived at the end of the first temple era. He was exiled into Babylonia, with the Jewish people, and he continued prophesying from there, from Babylonia, which is modern-day Iraq. So here we go. I'll just read it. And it was in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, while I was among the exiles at the river Kevar, and that's in Babylonia, the heavens opened, and I saw divine visions. On that 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Yoachin's exile, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel, son of Buzi, the Kohen, in the land of Kasdim, at the river Kavar, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. I saw, and there was a storm wind coming from the north, a great cloud and a blazing fire, and a radiance encompassing it from its midst, like the pure luminescence from the midst of the fire. And from its midst I saw the image of 4 chayot, angelic creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the figure of a man. Each had 4 faces, and each had 4 wings. Their legs were straight legs, and their feet were like round feet. They sparkled like burnished copper. They had human hands under their wings, on their 4 sides. The faces and the wings of the 4 of them were identical. The wings were joined one to the other, and they did not turn when they moved, each moving in the direction of its face. And the image of the faces was the face of a man, the face of a lion on its right, the 4 of them, and the face of an ox on the left, the 4 of them, and the face of an eagle, the 4 of them. Thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upwards. 2 wings of each were joined one to the other, and 2 covered their bodies. Each moved in the direction of its face. Wherever it was the will of God to go, they went. They did not turn when they moved. Keep on going. And the complexion of the chayot, their appearance was like fiery coals, burning like the appearance of torches. This was common to all the chayot, and there was brilliance to the fire, and from the fire went forth lightning. The chayot ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. As I observed the chayot, I saw one ophan, angelic being on the floor of the firmament at the side of each of the chayot with its 4 faces. The appearance of the ophanim and their work, these are different angels, was like chrysolite. I don't know what that is. And the 4 of them had the same image. Their appearance and their work was as if it were a wheel within a wheel. Okay, he keeps on describing this image, and it's known as the Merkava. What is the Merkava? It's not an Israeli tank, although it's also...
It's a chariot.
It's a chariot, the divine chariot. Why divine chariot? It's describing a chariot, as it were, with wheels, and ultimately on the chariot there's a throne, and on the throne is the image of a being, and that's meant to depict God. And that's what we read on Shavuot in the Haftorah, the vision of Ezekiel, Yecheskel Hanavi, who sees the divine chariot in this divine revelation. And that was his first prophecy, that's his first experience seeing God. That's what he saw, and he describes it. And then the rest of the book of Ezekiel is God communicating with him to tell the people about what to do to kind of repair what had broken and kind of mend their ways. Okay. So why do we read it on Shavuot? We read it for a very simple reason. Because what happened at Sinai, not only were the 10 Commandments given, there's also what we call Sinai revelation at Sinai, divine revelation. And so, as we're re-commemorating that divine revelation at Sinai, we read in the Haftorah the divine revelation to Ezekiel in the form of this chariot. Okay, so that's a little bit about the connection. But there were 2 prophets that God revealed himself in this way to. One was the prophet Ezekiel, as we read, and the other was the prophecy of Isaiah, Yeshayahu Hanavi, who lived earlier also, lived before Ezekiel, and he lived in Israel. He lived before the first temple's destruction. So the question that the commentators ask is, why is it that we choose to read the prophecy of Ezekiel and his experience of divine revelation, as opposed to the prophecy of Isaiah and his seeing of the divine chariot? Why is it that we read the revelation to Ezekiel and not the one to Isaiah? That's a question that's asked. Why do we read that on Shavuot? And one of the angles on this is, to enhance the question, the Talmud says, our sages tell us, that the prophecy, Isaiah's prophecy, was actually on a higher level than was Ezekiel's prophecy. Isaiah saw the divine himself, meaning God himself, as it were, whatever that means, whereas Ezekiel mainly saw the divine chariot, the entourage around God, but not directly God himself. So the question is, why would we read the lesser vision as opposed to the greater vision? Let's take a look at text number 3. Text number 3 is going to, it's where the Talmud clarifies text number 3 is going to create the connection between the Haftarah that we read and the holiday of Shavuot, and then we're going to ask some questions on that. Okay, so let's jump in. Toba, please read text number 3. This is the Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi.
Our sages of blessed memory explained that the Jewish people saw the divine chariot on the day that they received the Torah, just as Ezekiel saw it in his day. They even said that the prophetic vision of the youngest Jewish girl at Mount Sinai was as profound as that of Ezekiel.
Okay, so here we have the Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, who says that yes, at Sinai, everyone, even the smallest kid, saw the same type of experience or had the same type of revelation, prophetic experience as Ezekiel, and therefore we read Ezekiel's prophecy. This is kind of the lead-in, but we're going to ask the question soon, why not Isaiah's vision? Because that seems to be a higher level vision than Ezekiel. Here we go, text number 4. I'm going to read this. Text 4 is the opening of one of Isaiah's visions. So he writes, "And I saw God sitting atop a high and exalted throne, and the skirts of his robes filled the chamber. By the way, you should know, I think I mentioned this recently, you should know that there's, I think we talked about this in a Sunday Kabbalah class. We talked about different types of angels. Anyway, the Talmud says that one should avoid studying these. You have to be very careful when you read about the divine chariot stuff, lest you take it literally. We have to understand the abstraction that's needed to understand that these great prophets had a divine revelation, but couched it in kind of human terminology. So does God actually sit on a throne? No, God is not a human that needs a throne to sit on. So what does it mean? Whatever that abstraction means, but it's we have to be careful when we read it. It's almost like studying Kabbalah. You got to be careful when you study Kabbalah because you got to make sure you can understand it in a non-literal fashion. Okay, but what's the point over here? The point is that Isaiah also has a vision, and his vision is greater. Now, how do we know? How do we characterize the difference between these two visions? The Talmud does a great job of doing this in text number 5. Let's spin right around again. Das, if you don't mind, text 5.
Rabbi said, everything Ezekiel saw, Isaiah also saw. Ezekiel may be compared to a villager who sees the king. Isaiah may be compared to a city dweller who sees the king.
So what's the difference? What's the difference between the villager? Villager means like someone who lives out in the farms. The city dweller is the one who lives in the capital. What's the difference between the villager who sees the king and the city dweller who sees the king? You know what the difference is? What do you think the difference is? Who sees the motorcade more often? The city dweller. So when you see the motorcade all the time, you're not that impressed by it. Oh, you see a minister, an official, a motorcade, a this or that, a presidential, whatever, a helicopter. It's a normal Tuesday. But when you see the king, it's like, oh, so you pay attention to the king. You're not so much focused on the entourage, meaning the chariot. You're more focused on God. Whereas Ezekiel talks about the chariot. Oh my gosh, I saw these angels, and they had different faces and wings and this and that. I read it out loud before. We didn't have the reading here for you to see it, but I if you heard me read it, he's all excited about the chariot, as it were. Why? The villager. First time he's ever seeing this whole thing, he's very excited about it. As opposed to Isaiah, who's comfortable with the entourage, with the chariot, and focuses directly on God himself. If you take a look again, the text that I read a moment ago, text 4, so Isaiah begins chapter 6 of his book. He begins by saying, I saw God sitting upon a high and exalted throne. He doesn't even describe the chariot in much detail at this point. He doesn't describe the angels. He does a little bit after that, but he focuses on God and not on the entourage. And again, the Talmud says, because one guy is like this city dweller who's not impressed by the entourage, by the chariot, because he sees it all the time. And the other one's the villager who sees. So who had a greater vision? Who had a greater revelation? Isaiah or Ezekiel? Isaiah. So again, begs the question, why on Shavuot, the day of the giving of the Torah, the day in which the greatest divine revelation happened? Why is it that we read the story of Ezekiel and his prophetic vision, and not the story of Isaiah and his prophetic vision? What is up with that? Let's continue with text number 6. And here Maimonides explains what we just read in the Talmud. All right, Mira, please read this.
Isaiah had a more complete vision of God than Ezekiel. The vision that overwhelmed and seemed incredible to Ezekiel was so familiar to Isaiah that he didn't bother to wax poetic about it.
There you go. So Isaiah, it seems, had a greater experience to the point that he didn't have to go on and on and on about every angel and what they looked like and what their wings were doing. So then why not read Isaiah's prophecy? Then we have one more question. Okay, this is going to be our third question. Question number 1 is God in the tumult, or is God in the quiet, still voice? That's question 1. Question 2 is, why is the Haftarah of Shavuot, why is it the story of Ezekiel's vision and not Isaiah's vision? And the third question is from text 7. Text 7, as I mentioned, this is the very last verse of the Haftarah. The Haftarah is the first 28 verses of chapter 1 of Ezekiel and the 12th verse of the 3rd chapter of Ezekiel, meaning there's a jump cut. You read chapter 1 through 28, and then you jump to chapter 3, verse 12, and that's what concludes the Haftarah, which is weird. Usually you just read a section, and here you're jumping a few chapters ahead to a specific verse, and the question is why? Well, what does that verse say? Toba, please take it away.
And a wind lifted me, and I heard behind me the sound of a great uproar. Blessed is the glory of God from his place.
Thank you. So this is a refrain in Hebrew that you might be familiar with. Baruch kavod Hashem mimkomo. We recite it in the prayers. But this is Ezekiel saying how the wind lifted him, and the wind lifted me. I heard behind me the sound of a great uproar. Blessed is the glory of God from his place. Again, it's the idea of a great uproar and a lot of activity, a lot of action. And so, what is the meaning behind that? What is the meaning behind all of this? And so, my friends, I want to share with you the following. I want to share with you the secret to this divine revelation, and really a tale of two divine revelations: the revelation of Isaiah versus the revelation of Ezekiel. And why is it that on one level Isaiah is greater, but on the other level we might say that the revelation of Ezekiel is greater? And so here we go. The Isaiah's vision was one in where he directly honed in on the truth of the Creator. He honed in immediately on a vision of the Almighty God. Whereas Ezekiel was able to see in the entourage, what I'm calling the entourage, in the chariot, he was able to see the divine appearance in the chariot. Meaning, do you look at how it shows up in the source, or do you look at how it also affects the chariot and the display that's behind that? Ezekiel saw the display and the source, whereas Isaiah pretty much honed in only on the source. And although there seems to be an advantage in honing in on the source, there's also a tremendous advantage in seeing the chariot as well. And let me explain. There's a beautiful Hasidic teaching that says, and I'm paraphrasing, it says like this: when you're studying in the synagogue, or praying in the synagogue and studying in the study hall, the Beit Knesset and the Beit Medrash, and you're connecting with God, you're seeing God in the abstract. Whereas when you go to work and now you need to earn a living, and you see how, your efforts are guided by God's hand, then you can see God in the concrete. There's one thing to believe in God in the abstract. Like, I believe that God exists. I believe that God takes care of things. I believe that God runs the world. That's one dimension. But there's quite another dimension to see God and to see God's hand in my life as I live it. And that's even more powerful. The idea of hashgacha pratis, which means divine providence, is something that is so powerful and so beautiful. Do I see God as being almost disconnected from reality, or do I see God in my reality? There's a joke that I like to share, and you probably heard me say it, on more than one occasion, about the rabbi who's getting his front walkway repaved, and he's got the company out and they're repaving the sidewalk, and they put up the yellow tape around it, and the neighborhood kids come by when it's wet and they start writing their names in. And he opens his front door and starts screaming at the neighborhood kids, you get out of here, you good for nothing, I'm going to call your parents, whatever it is. And his wife, the Rebbitzin, the rabbi's wife, says, you're screaming at the kids. You always say the kids are the future of our people, the future, the next generation. You always say, we have to love the kids. Why are you screaming? He says, I love the kids in the abstract, but not in the concrete, right? That's the punchline. In the abstract, but not in the concrete. I think it's very important to recognize that there's one thing, believing in God in the abstract. Imagine a Torah scholar who shows up to the synagogue, right, every day and spends the whole day studying and learning about God and thinking about God. But does this scholar see God in the concrete, or just sees God in the abstract? Meaning sees God as, above and detached. Or do we see God in the everyday? If you go to work and you're part of this world, you're earning a living and you're wheeling and dealing, and then you see how everything is being guided by the hand of God, you don't just see God up there, you see God down here, and that's a much more powerful apprehension of God, where God is not just disconnected from our reality, but shows up in our reality. What happened at Sinai? What happened at Sinai 3,338 years ago? It wasn't just that we got a guide for life. And we just finished a course called For All Humankind that Torah has a guide for living. It wasn't just that, although that's a big piece of it. It was that God essentially said, I want to erase the divide between heaven and earth. There might be a belief that heaven is God's domain and the earth is our domain, and the two don't mix. But at Sinai, what God said, at Mount Sinai, what God said was, no, I want divine values to permeate this world, to impact and to influence physical reality. And I want you to have the opportunity to sometimes, when you do the right thing, to climb a little bit closer to heaven. I want to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. But that God should also be seen here below like God is seen above. That's the idea of Sinai. It's such a powerful idea, the idea that you and I can have the ability to live a life guided by divine values, to live a life that is uplifted, to get a little bit closer to the divine and bring heaven down to earth. That is the purpose. That's what happened at Sinai. The way the Midrash describes it, says there was once a decree that said the people of Syria should not go to Rome, and the people of Rome should not go to Syria. And then the decree was annulled and said, people of Rome, you can go to Syria. People of Syria, you can go to Rome. And that's the way our sages describe it. Originally, heaven was God's and earth was ours. And at Sinai, what God said was, let's erase the divide. Heaven can come down to earth, and earth can become a little bit more heaven-like. There can be a mixing of the two. And that's the whole idea. The whole idea is to find God not in the escape from our reality, but inside our reality. To find God in the everyday goodness and kindness that we share. One story that I think really captures this. It's such a beautiful story. I think it goes. I think it's told about the Baal Shem Tov, where there was a man. We spoke about Elijah the prophet. So the story goes that there was one of his disciples comes to him and says, "I want to merit to be visited, or to have to see Elijah the prophet." It's considered to be like a great gift to see Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi. I want to be able to see him. So the Baal Shem Tov said, if you want to see Elijah the prophet, say, here's what you do. Before the holiday, I want you to fill up like a wagon. That's how they car, right? They had wagons back in the day. Fill up a wagon of food and toys and gifts for family. Go all the way to the edge of town, to the edge of the forest, or whatever it is, and deliver it to such and such place, to such and such house. Deliver it there, you'll see Elijah. So before the holiday, he does it. Let's say before, Sukkot, whichever holiday it was. He does it, he delivers it, and he said, deliver it quiet, just drop it and leave, and then you'll see Elijah. So he drops it and leaves. Comes back to the Baal Shem Tov and says, I did it, but I didn't see Elijah. So the Baal Shem Tov said, for the next holiday, do it again. Does it the next holiday, brings stuff, delivers it, drops it off. Nothing, no Elijah. He comes back to the Baal Shem Tov and says, I didn't see anything. He says, do it again, third time. Third time he does it, but this time as he approaches, he hears the kids and the family say to their mother, do you think Elijah the prophet will come and deliver all the toys and all the food and all the gifts again this holiday? And the mother says, hopefully. And he realized at that point that if you want to see Elijah the prophet, what the best way to experience that is? Be Elijah the prophet. Right? We need to see Elijah the prophet, to see salvation, to see blessings, whatever. Be the one that conveys that. It's one thing to see Elijah in the Himmel, in the heavens. It's another one to see Elijah right here. And it's by embodying those values that we see Elijah. It's by embodying Torah values that we see God not in heaven, but on earth. And so just kind of circling back to this idea about the chariot and about the prophecy of Ezekiel and the prophecy of Isaiah, different prophets and different ways that they saw it. Yes, Isaiah was the city prophet, meaning I don't know if that phrase sounds complimentary or not, but he was like the urban prophet. So what that means is he saw it directly. Like he wasn't at all impressed by the entourage and by the divine chariot. He was honing straight in on God. The problem is that he didn't see God in the chariot also. He didn't see God kind of manifesting. He didn't see that experience kind of showing up in the lower realms as well. The whole point of Revelation at Sinai, the whole point of Shavuot, the holiday we're about to experience, is the ability to bring heaven down to earth, the ability to see God in the everyday around us by behaving in a divine fashion. Like the story of the Baal Shem Tov and the man, it's by being Elijah the prophet for someone in need, right? Being the hero, being the angel for someone else. You want to see angels? Okay. What about being an angel? Can you be an angel? I always share Friday nights. We say Shalom Aleichem. We say the famous before the Kiddush, the famous song and prayer about welcoming the angels and blessing the angels that traditionally are with us as we walk home from synagogue and we enjoy our Shabbat dinners. But as I like to point out, there's one thing to see angels that are heavenly angels, and do we really see them? I don't know. But sometimes you can look around the table and see the angels of flesh and blood, the people that are important in our lives. And those angels are no less angelic than the ones that are, floating around the heavens. So I think there's something so beautiful about Ezekiel's vision, who sees not just God, but who sees how God shows up in the entire entourage, who sees the whole process, who sees the beauty of the divine chariot. And in doing so, he sees that reality reflects a higher reality, and that's the whole point. Let's take a look at text 8. Okay, I'm going to read text 8. Just doing the math here, who we're up to. I think we're up to me. Okay, so let's do text 8. Beautiful text from the Avodat HaKodesh, Rabbi Meir Ibn Gabbai. He says, Ezekiel arrived at his knowledge of God through seeing and understanding the lower chariot. He grasped that there is a throne above the throne he saw, a chariot above the chariot he glimpsed, a rider above the rider he beheld, and a glory above the glory he perceived. By seeing the four angels in the guise of terrestrial animals, he knew and recognized that there are parallel angels in the celestial realm of true unification. This is true of everything he saw. He understood that everything he saw in the lower sphere was a reflection of the higher sphere, just as the Torah speaks in the lower sphere and alludes to the higher sphere. That is so beautiful because that really reflects the purpose of Torah. Torah speaks to us, but captures and carries a higher reality. And that is what Ezekiel saw. He saw physical embodiment of a spiritual reality, and the whole point is to take the spiritual and embody it physically. Pre-Sinai, you could keep the two separate. Post-Sinai, it's all about bridging those two realities. Let's continue with text number 9. Das, if you don't mind, please read text 9.
Every created being appears to have its own existence, but it is truly nothing compared to the activating force that creates it and the breath of Hashem within it. They continuously call upon it to exist and bring it forth from nothingness into existence.
Look at that. Such a beautiful text. Everything in our created reality seems to run autonomously. It seems to have its own reality, its own existence, its own energy, its own life force. But really, its entire existence is because of a divine power that acts on it. And to be able to see it, I'm looking at the beautiful fruit platter here, to look at a platter of fruit, grapes, and to see not just grapes, but to see divine grapes, to see beautiful fruit that God has blessed and that God has granted us. That's a different vision. It's almost like seeing the matrix, seeing the truth behind reality. So you could see here's how it usually works. There's a binary perspective, and then there's what I would call the Sinai perspective. The binary perspective is either it's grapes or it's God, meaning it's either something physical, a table, grapes, a water bottle, whatever, physical, or there's God. That's either or, physical or spiritual. The deeper perspective is, no, even the physical is an embodiment of something spiritual. Everything physical is an embodiment of divine energy and divine light. And it's so beautiful. Let's take a look at text number 10, where the Rebbe speaks about what really happened at Sinai and how it's a calling for every one of us to kind of bridge these two realities of heaven and earth. Amira, please take it away.
When the Torah was given, the world lost its sense of self and was sublimated by the intense supernal divine revelation. The globe itself experienced this sublimation. As our sages said, the birds did not chirp, the world as a whole stood still. The momentary sublimation that occurred when the Torah was given made it possible for the world to eventually be refined, transparent, and elevated into a vessel and a home for God.
Thank you. And again, the same idea, the same point is that we're not meant to say, okay, the world is physical, God is spiritual, so now choose. I'll have a moment of spirituality, a moment of physicality. No, the purpose is to bridge these two realities. And I think, by the way, for most of us, even if you might be thinking like, I don't know, do I really keep them separate? I think I do a pretty good job melding the two. I'll ask you a question. Do you think in your own life, do you ever have the experience in your own life where you think to yourself, okay, I'm now having a moment of something wholly physical. I'm now eating lunch, or I'm now going to a baseball game, or whatever it is. But this is a completely physical activity. And then you go to synagogue, and then you pray or do a mitzvah, study Torah, and that's a completely spiritual. But it's almost like one might silo these two realities. I have my physical activities, and I have my spiritual activities. I have my mundane life, and I have my Jewish life, and those two are two separate. The idea of Sinai, as we just saw the Rabbi speak about, and all these texts indicate, is to blend the two. The World Cup is coming to the United States, to North America, right? I think North America, right? And there are going to be some matches played here in Atlanta, as well as other cities around the country. And I was because I do a monthly lunch and learn at Coca-Cola headquarters, and I was just speaking to them about trying to get some sort of spaces created for people to pray or to wrap tefillin, to have some sort of, and I don't know that it's going to happen through Coca-Cola specifically, but one of the things that certainly is a hallmark of Chabad is when a big thing is happening in town, well, you show up, not to watch the game necessarily, but to find people, to encourage another mitzvah to happen at that opportunity, right? You go to Manhattan, you hit the streets, and you say, hey, would you like to put on tefillin? Let's rock and roll. You go to the World Cup match, and you stand outside, or the Super Bowl, and you say, hey, are you Jewish? Would you like some Shabbat candles? Would you like to wrap tefillin? That's a way of bridging the two. See, otherwise, it could be like, well, hold on. The synagogue is a synagogue, and Mercedes-Benz, by the way, they can't call it Mercedes-Benz for the World Cup. I don't know if you know that, because Mercedes-Benz is not a sponsor of the Olympics. So they call it the Atlanta Stadium. So the they're covering the logo. I don't know if you know this. They're covering the logo on the stadium because they didn't pay FIFA money to be a corporate sponsor. So they have to cover the stadium. It's very interesting, these corporate, very interesting, these maneuverings. Yeah, I don't know if there's a spiritual lesson there. I'm sure there is also. But I think it's very easy to believe that the stadium is man's and the synagogue is God's. And that's the biggest mistake we can make. That means we're reverting to a post-Sinai reality, where Hashemayim, Shemayim L'Hashem, V'aretz Nitzan L'Bnei Adam, where the heavens are for God and the earth is for human beings. That's not the way. That's what happened at Sinai, was to erase that divide. Don't look at it as a binary construct. Well, it's either spiritual or physical. It can be both. Meaning, yes, it's a stadium, but we can also do a mitzvah there. I mean, I take my kids to Braves games whenever I'm not teaching and I have an evening. I take my kids to, not every time, but we go to baseball games. So we'll sometimes put together, if there's enough people, we'll put together a minyan for Mincha, Ma'ariv, in one of the sections over there. And one time I was there a year or two ago, and there was somebody who needed to say Kaddish. They were in the 11 months, 12 months of mourning for a parent who passed away, and we were able to make a minyan for them. It's about finding holy opportunities, spiritual opportunities, in the most physical of environments. That's why we read Ezekiel's chariot. Isaiah's chariot is almost too pure, too sublime. And to find God in the sublime, that's easy. It's almost too easy. To find God In the physical manifestation of the physical, as it were, manifestation of the chariot, that's a little bit more remarkable. That's why we read Ezekiel's vision, where the chariot is now concretized, to find even in a physical chariot an expression of the divine. That's what happened at Sinai. That's the calling for all of us. And so I asked at the beginning of the class, so which one is it? Is God found in the still silent voice, or is God found in the noise? Here's what I think. Although God told Elijah the prophet, you'll find me in the still silent voice, that's where you'll find God in the source. But what does God want from us? He wants us to find him in the stadium. He wants us to find him on the streets of Manhattan. He wants us to find him at lunch, at our desks, at work. When there's a lot of noise around, can you take 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 2 minutes and eat something kosher with a blessing before and after the food that you eat? Study some Torah for a few minutes, middle of your day. Can you find God in the hustle and bustle of life? If you can, that is what Sinai was all about. And so, my friends, as we conclude today's class, I want to end with a blessing for all of us. Number one, come Thursday night, Friday, we should re-experience Sinai like the original, like the first time, meaning we should feel God's call, we should feel God's energy, we should feel God's empowerment to each and every one of us, not just to sit back and enjoy those spiritual moments, but to find God in the everyday, to find God in the everything and the everywhere. Number one. Number two, there's a long-standing tradition that we bless each other on in anticipation for the holiday, Kabbalas HaTorah b'simcha u'b'pnimius. That this year we wish each other you should receive the Torah with joy and with internalization. Number one, it should be joyous. It shouldn't feel like a burden. Judaism should never feel like a burden. I think there were many times in many eras where people would say, "Oy." You ever hear that? You ever hear a Jew kvetch? Oy, oy vey, right? It's hard to be a Jew. That's old school. It has to be exciting. We have to be excited. It has to be beautiful. Judaism has to be beautiful and vibrant. So number one, to receive Torah again this year, b'simcha, with joy, not as a burden. I'll tell you a story about that, a parable. There was once a little bird that was growing its wings, right? It was coming of age and its wings were growing. It complained to its mother, I used to be able to run around really fast, and now I have these big heavy things growing on me. I can't run so fast. The mother bird says to the baby bird, little Zisela, sweetie pie, those are not meant to slow you down. With those wings you can fly, right? What feels like a burden sometimes can make you soar. We should never look at Judaism, Torah, Mitzvot as a burden. On the contrary, it lets us soar. Number one, ubepnimiut, and the second blessing is not only with joy, but also with internalization. That it should really transform us from the inside out and transform every experience. And again, the key idea today is to not silo our lives. I have my spiritual moments, right? The Tuesday night class is a spiritual moment, and then my Tuesday lunch is a physical moment. No, make your lunch also a spiritual moment. Make the class also a physical moment. Grab some grapes. I'm kidding. But we should mix the two. Mix the two. Find spirituality, find meaning, find purpose in the mundane as well, and that is how we do it. Rabbi Markowitz is here. Rabbi Markowitz is a good friend of mine. He's also Chabad of rural Georgia, which means that any city, right here. You want to come for the camera? Want to say hi to the folks? Yeah, come say hi. All right, you have to. Yeah, there you go. Rabbi Markowitz. Now, Rabbi Markowitz, again, Chabad of rural Georgia. What does that mean? Any city or town. Village. We talked about villagers. Yecheskel was a village. Was like the village. Any village that doesn't have a synagogue, a rabbi, a established community, but there's some Jews there, he visits. Thousands of people.
Down here, he visits us about every other month.
Yes. Oh, Dr. Maxey's here.
Oh, Joey?
Yeah, right here.
How fun.
Come say hi again.
Oh, hi.
Now you can say hi. I forgot.
That changes everything. Hey.
I saw you walking in the background. I recognized you.
That's funny. That's good. Okay. Hey.
There you have it. So look, you could say, no, Judaism is for the big cities. The big cities with the synagogues and the establishment and the JCCs and the federations, that's where Judaism is. If you go to, give me the most rural, what's the most far-flung place that you go to?
Just found a Jewish lady today in Union Point.
He just found a Jewish woman today in Union Point,
Yeah.
Georgia. Is that a city? Town?
Thanks.
One Jew.
It's a one road in and out.
One road in and out. Unions. Okay, look. There. Don't bother there. Like
It's
what?
15 miles from Maxie's, Georgia.
Interesting.
It's 15 miles from.
From where? From where? What's that place?
From Maxie's, Georgia.
Maxie's,
I
Georgia?
don't think I've ever been.
He may not have ever been. All right. Well, you add that to your destination.
New town to go to.
By the way, funny story. This is anecdotal, but very funny. We did there was a community trivia night the other week, last week, and one of the trivia questions is how many square miles is the entire state of Georgia? And there was one man in a room of 75 people that knew the answer on the dot. That was Rabbi Markowitz, because I think that's his pitch. He's like, I'm the rabbi to the X number of square miles, so he knew it to the. Like you had to be within plus minus. He nailed it. Okay, let's cut it. Let's get to the chase. But and I know I keep on saying this, but I feel so passionate about it. Don't silo your Yiddishkeit. Don't silo Judaism. Don't make it have to fit into a box that like only happens at a certain time in a certain place in a certain context. But have it leak into the rest of your life. Have it leak into a dinner party, introduce something, say a blessing, share a word of Torah, or even whatever it is. Find an opportunity outside the specific confines that we would consider to be holy or spiritual, and make those spaces also holy and spiritual. All right, I think that's it. I think that is all that I am sharing for tonight. Yes, make sense? Did it? Sort of? Good? All right. Rabbi Markowitz, thank you for being the guest.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Wonderful. Wishing everybody a Chag Sameach, Kabbalah Satorah B'Simcha Pnimius. Receive it this year once again with joy and with internalization, and may we may we erase the divide, tear down that wall that divides between the various parts of our lives, to feel God everywhere, even in the chariot. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we can enjoy the cheesecake. All right, Richard, good to see you. Mom, good to see you. Ellie, good to see you. Dr. Maxie, good to see you. All right, see you guys. Laila Tov, Chag Sameach.